Hello, everyone, and welcome to the panel, Putting Grind Culture to Bed, Pedagogical Strategies for Happier, Healthier Design Students. Today, we're reuniting a group of panelists who are design educators inside of higher education that centralize healthy work-life habits in the classroom and in their own practice. This is a reunion, so we did this panel about 5 months ago. And so we're coming back together to record it for posterity. Some of our conversation is going to be a little different than back during the AIGA Design Educators Conference. That's because we're growing and learning and adapting as time moves forward. I'm going to quickly introduce our panelists, and they're going to give a little wave when I say their name. First up is Meena Khalili. They're an associate professor of design and interaction at the University of South Carolina. Her research is driven by her experience as an Iranian American. Her work explores cultural identity and generational storytelling. Khalili is the recipient of the National Award for Outstanding Professional Achievement in Graphic Design by the Southeastern College Art Conference. Erica Holeman is an assistant professor in the Communication Design program at the University of North Texas. Holeman's research centers on empathy and humanity in design and design pedagogy. Before becoming a full-time educator, Holeman worked as a senior designer at Pentagram. And Ryan Gibboney is an assistant professor in integrated media arts at Juniata College. Gibboney has industry experience in multiple design fields ranging from publication design to pro bono community design. She's the founder of Re-Envision Huntington, a local revitalization nonprofit. And my name is Leigh Farley, and I'm an assistant professor at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, teaching in the design program, and I'll be acting as our moderator today. All right, so our first question, Ryan, if you wouldn't mind going first, how do you see grind culture manifesting in your classroom?
Yeah, so thank you for hosting this and giving us the opportunity to have this conversation again and share it with the outside world. I remember from our discussion and also just things that I've reflected on here in the last week preparing that many of the grind culture environments that are created are mostly based on this feeling of competition that either as faculty we somehow create or as students, you know, when we were undergraduate or graduate design students, there's this feeling of, did you see their work? It's so good. I want mine to be better. And how can I achieve that? And just this constant feeling of always doing your best work and trying to achieve something that in some cases might not be achievable with deadlines and access to materials and all of the things. So one of the things that I would like to share too is also this concept of partnering with our students on client-based projects, and that a lot of the time students feel this really heavy need and urge for them to be perfect. But also, you know, I know many of us, those of us that are on the panel that have talked about this client-based work, that it's more important to learn from the process than to come out of it with this product that feels like a certain thing, you know, one direction or the other. So those are the ways that I have seen it, as this feeling of competition and this feeling of perfection and perfectionism, and then talking to the students about that's not what we need to achieve, but just doing good work and something that's usable and useful.
Yeah.
Just to add to that, you know, Ryan mentioned this idea of achievability. We also know that a lot of our students work, so just time-wise and them having the time to do, they're looking at professional work sometimes, and that's all that professional designer has been doing, and they're balancing work and school. But also, you know, there's all these little things that you hear people talking in between class or at the beginning of class that, oh, I haven't gotten any sleep, I haven't eaten lunch today, things like that. And what I think is a hard lesson to learn is that when you continue to make those sacrifices, the students then end up making little mistakes, you know, slipping with the X-Acto knife or just, you know, being sloppy with craftsmanship. But I think really the key thing Ryan already spoke to, which is just not appreciating the process and not retaining that for future projects.
I have this rule, and I always start my 100 level students with this rule. Whenever we are crafting a final project or we're cutting something out with an X-Acto blade, I always tell them no X-Acto blades after midnight. because invariably, right, every single year there's somebody that goes to the hospital or needs stitches from, you know, a 2 a.m. X-Acto blade fight. You know, not really a fight, but I always underscore that because you know, that's something that I saw happening in my first position. This was, gosh, how long ago? 12 years ago. And students not only were, you know, burning the candle at both ends, but there was also an expectation of them, maybe in their families, that they would also have full-time jobs while attending undergrad, or at least part-time jobs. And again, this was in my first position, and you know, I didn't know, that was not my experience. In undergrad, personally, I had a part-time job, but I did not have a full-time job. And I remember coming to the realization that this was how my students were living their lives, and I was meeting them in the classroom with them coming to the door with all of that. And it took me far too long to realize that, and to start making amendments to my expectations. These are expectations that were put on me by people that were not like me in my undergrad, which was not like their experience. So learning from that, right? Learning from those, that sort of waterfall process of how we get our teaching, I don't know, methods, and then putting a stop to things that just don't make any sense in the culture that we're teaching, or, you know, or however you want to frame that. That was a pivotal moment for me. Not only were my students working some full-time jobs with expectations of supporting their families, but they had additional stresses, like some were homeless and never brought that to the classroom. And I would only find out, you know, maybe after they graduated or something would happen. So it's not just the extracurricular commitments that I think people might presume. It is additional life stresses, factors, cultural factors that we have to understand might be additional distractions for our students. And who does it serve, and what does it serve when we are pushing this grind culture idea?
Yeah, that's why I was really excited to have all of y'all on this panel, because you represent so many different types of students across the United States. And so it's really nice to get like these different perspectives on the how a diverse group of students is reacting to grind culture and what that manifests and looks like at these different institutions. And so talking about all these like safety and work-life balance and workload and like this unseen workload, how are y'all implementing strategies in the classroom that encourage healthier work-life habits? And has there been things that have worked better than others?
I can just start really quickly and say, I developed an engagement policy. I know I mentioned this 5 months ago when we first had this conversation, and there were a few questions about this, but I developed this engagement policy because the university requires us to have an attendance policy, and that's fine, but I think an engagement policy in my syllabus values the impact a student has on their work and the experience and that of others that they might have. So I put that in my syllabus alongside an attendance policy, because I want students to understand, okay, if we have to have an attendance policy, we also need to acknowledge that engagement is just as important, and you can be engaged and be present without necessarily having your butt in the seat. And I think COVID really taught me that, taught a lot of us that. So that is one strategy that I utilize in my classroom.
Just real quick, how do you grade engagement?
Oh, anywhere impact can be seen.
Okay.
And so whether that's on our CMS platform, that we have for the course courses, whether that's that or presence actually in class. Whenever we have a visiting artist, if you're there, whenever we have anything that we do, anything, I don't offer extra credit. I scan the room. I listen to who's talking. There's so many different ways. If I have office hours and you come, that's another way. So impact, the way that that's seen, that is part of the engagement policy, in any way that it can be seen.
Gotcha, thanks.
There's
Yeah.
a couple different, oh, sorry, Ryan.
No, go ahead.
A couple different things I've tried to, and I know that I can't always employ these things consistently. Depends on the course. It depends on the level of the course, et cetera. But I really like the idea of the engagement policy because Meena's absolutely right. Somebody can be in the room but not be present, right? And it's really hard to instill that lesson of you're not just checking a box by being here. Like try to get or try to pull as much as you can from the class. But some other kind of little things that I've tried. If I am teaching a new course, either new to me or just, the first time I've taught it or completely new, is to do a survey midway into the semester. So we all have to have, student perceptions of teaching scores usually at the end of the semester, but students are tired. They have a hard time reflecting on all of the processes. So by checking in with them midway, I get a little bit better of idea of, am I meeting with them where they are? Are they able to keep up with the resources that are required? Do they have access to the labs, to the materials? What is working in terms of how many lectures there are or how fast I speak? I tend to talk really fast sometimes. So these things help me to make the course better. It helps them to get what they need from me. And it also gives them some agency so that they understand that they're part of the course, that it's not just me giving them things, but that there's this conversation that's happening. And then the other thing that I try to do, and again, this doesn't work every semester, but if there is a course that has a co-enrollment requirement, so they're in 2 design studio courses, I'll just talk with that other professor and see when the deadlines are, just so they don't have a deadline on the same day or the same week. If there's any way I can stagger that, that helps a little bit.
So I'm really glad you just went, Erica, because you just reminded me of a couple other things that I have started doing in the last 1.5 to 2 years. But the first thing is definitely in my 100 and 200 level courses, I do a pre-test at the start of the semester to evaluate. Since I have students coming in, it's an interdisciplinary program. Some of them are focused on design or production or video, while others are majoring in marketing or communications, and they're just joining for 1 or 2 courses. And so for me to be able to see right at the start of the semester, kind of the different levels of knowledge and understanding that are coming in, that's instrumental for me to determine how I teach the course. I've even had discussions with colleagues in my department about, oh, your syllabus isn't ready the first day of the semester. And I always say, no, I need to meet with my students first, and we need to have a discussion about when should things be due based on the type of environment that we are creating with the classroom that we have this semester. And so, yes, having that agency and the understanding that things do need to remain flexible to a certain extent, while things can also, certain items can be set more concretely. And then the other thing I know we talked a little bit about at the conference, and Meena just reminded me of kind of the engagement and attendance policy. I do similar. We're required to have some type of an engagement policy here at Juniata. I also have an attendance policy that discusses how I expect the students to work in those local engagement or community engaged learning courses, since we are working with community partners and the expectations are a little higher because of the client-based work. But I also do ungrading. And that has been something that for me, as an alternative assessment tool, allows the flexibility that if all 16 students are coming in with different levels of knowledge or understanding of the environment, that's one strategy that has proven to be really supportive of allowing you to do what you can and contribute where you're at and push your boundaries to whatever it is that you're trying to achieve, but also to have realistic expectations on what those final outcomes might be.
Could you describe how you set up your ungrading?
Yeah, so I don't have letter grades until the end of the semester. Students have multiple opportunities to meet with me throughout the semester, and we usually meet sometime a few weeks in. They submit a project proposal that will become their project report at the end of the semester. So it's a continuous document that they're working on throughout all 15 weeks. And they do time tracking, similar to what Meena mentioned. There's this, what did you participate in different capacities throughout the course of the semester? They can write reflections about client meetings. So post-client meeting, they can draft a reflection and submit that online, put that into their report. And so there's no letter grade for attendance or engagement, but there's an evaluation of how they showed up throughout the course of the semester. And each of those things can be evaluated in different capacities, either through Moodle. We use Moodle. I have Slack set up for messaging. And then our community partner meetings, we always have a note taker that keeps track of who's at the meeting. So those are all ways that we can keep track of how people are engaging in different ways.
So I was inspired by Ryan last, I guess 5 months ago, last semester when we met. And I have my students do timesheets now.
Yeah.
And I cannot believe it took me this long to figure. I mean, to like, I needed you to say that so that I would be like, oh my gosh, that's exactly.
Yeah.
First, it does so many good things. It builds so many good habits, and then it also allows me to get a sense of like if they have everything that they need to move forward, or where they might be stuck, or But I digress. I did start using that in my courses this semester, and it's gone really, really well. It's been extremely helpful. It's just a simple timesheet. That's how I started this, because I was like, we'll see if this works. If this sticks and it's good, we'll keep doing it. I do give grades though, and I want to actually see if Kaylee, if you don't mind me asking Ryan a question here. So generally for teaching evaluations, women and people of color have historically had more difficult reviews. And so I'm curious how the no grades until the end structure has affected, or has it affected your faculty evaluations from your students?
Yeah. So number one, time tracking. Nobody likes to do that. I don't like to do it, but I talk to the students all the time about, if you ever want to do work and get paid for it, you have to know how much time it takes. And I teach a course called Business of Design, and it's all about contracts and portfolios and time tracking. But the question about, evaluations, and we have course evaluations and advising evaluations. I have a heavy advising load at Juniata, with both major advisees and general advisees, in addition to my teaching load, which I traditionally teach stacked courses, which means I have courses that have small numbers, but I still teach multiples. And so this semester I'm teaching 5 courses, and I have 35 advisees. And that's been my traditional load since I've been here. It's gone up and down a little bit based on enrollment. But what I have seen in my evaluations from the time, so I believe I implemented ungrading fall of 2020. We were back in person that semester, and I had worked on Zoom with a colleague in English, and she had supported, there's this research, here's a book about it, read it, let's meet on Zoom. And I set up rubrics, I shared them with her, got some feedback. And my course evaluations from then until now have never had any negative comments about ungrading or letter grades. I have had a few meetings with students that are neuroscience or biology or in a field that they really are focused on the grade. And we do still do critiques. So something to keep in mind if you do ever choose to implement something like ungrading, you do still have the structure of those exam critiques or the times where you're expected to present your work and discuss it in a way that could be evaluated. And so that's a great opportunity for the students to contribute directly to how they will be evaluated. And then I do talk with them after that. And the other thing just about evaluation process, all of my letters, I recently was under tenure review, and all of my letters of support had all mentioned that this appears to be this magical way of approaching student evaluation and assessment based on my curriculum. Now, obviously, this may not work in every field and especially at every institution. I am one faculty member that teaches design here. The other faculty members are studio arts. And so that's something else I could imagine if I was in a department with other design faculty and I did this, but they didn't, that could also be complicated. But for me, it works at this very small environment that I'm at. If I were to go back to a R1, it may not work in the same capacity.
Thank you. And that's part of what's great is seeing how things work in different environments, because some things may work for one classroom, but not for like the next semester, and some things may work for one university, but not another. So it's great to get a range of what y'all are working on. You brought up a great point about, as faculty, how we have a lot of teaching and a lot of service expectations and also a lot of research expectations. So I want to hear about how Bryan culture has impacted your work-life balance for you all as individuals, and what you've tried to maintain healthy boundaries.
I can go first this time. I'm on tenure track at an R1, so all of us are in different spots, but I think the inclination for a lot of my colleagues and other people I've spoken to on tenure track is just to try to do everything just in case. Just in case there's this one last thing I could fit in. And so we really just have to check ourselves and ask for clear feedback, clear guidelines, so that we're not self-imposing these expectations from thin air. So just for me, it's been important to keep getting clarification on where I am and what's expected of me, so that I'm not making up these wild goals. And then also just, speaking up for yourself. If someone asks you to take on another committee or to take on another task, you can say, yes, what should I unprioritize? Because there's only so much time in a day. And so when things keep getting added, if we don't let it be known that we're at a limit of some sort, then we'll just keep getting asked. Mm-hmm. So we have to be advocates for ourselves and our time.
I want to applaud that so much. Yeah, I've said no to 2 really big things this week, and it's Tuesday. It's hard. It was really hard to walk away from one of the opportunities, because it was an international opportunity. And listen, here's the thing. I did go through tenure, and I came out the other side. I can't say unscathed, but I came out the other side. And my thinking was, they're going to ask somebody who needs this more than me, and I can't do this right now. Mm. And so I have 2 strategies that I use to support myself. And when this question was asked 5 months ago, I vaguely remember saying, I don't think that maybe I should even be sitting on this panel, because anyone who really knows me knows how much, all of us on this panel, anyone who really knows us knows how much time we put into our work. I have set my life up. I have completely changed my life in the last 8 years to support a life that centers around my ability to work as much or as little as I want to on the things that I want to do in the career that I have chosen. That was a hard move, but I did it. And so that was one thing that I did to support myself. But I'm motivated strongly by intention. I think as a mother, as a partner, every moment with my family is more precious, and I really have to be present. And I fail at that a lot of days. And that's something that I have to remind myself and really work on, is being present and being intentional with the time that I have with my family. My syllabus states that I am offline certain hours of the day. Like, don't even try to get in contact with me. You're not going to hear back. Okay. You can contact me, but you're not going to hear back from me at 2 a.m. I have had colleagues in the past that do respond to those emails. And I think for me, it's impossible, but I imagine what that sets our students up for in the future. If they're getting a response at 2 a.m., it worries me. So I have a syllabus statement about the window of time that I am not available. And I encourage my students to do the same, to turn off, to allow themselves to sleep, and find their own methods of seeking balance while they work. So those are the things that I have in my mind, when you ask that question, Kaylee.
And one of the things that I'm remembering also from our discussion out in Seattle was this reality that we all are here today because in some capacity we have done all the things that we needed to do to get to this point, to achieve a bachelor, or to achieve this job promotion, or to achieve this position. And, our students are consistently looking at us as the people that they're looking up to. And the more that we do to overwork ourselves and to lose our own identity, the more that they remember that, oh, Ryan didn't eat lunch yesterday and didn't do this and was here until 7 o'clock and didn't get to see her children. And so I always remind myself on the days like that, which unfortunately yesterday and today will be 2 of those days. So for the rest of the week, I do my best to cut the meetings out and to create some boundaries and to say no when the 50 extra things come in, or there's a candidate on campus and they need someone to meet from this committee that I serve on. And so I think both what Erica and Meena just mentioned, that you have to find what works for you. And I tell my students the same thing. Whether you're a professional, you're a professional student, you're a full-time working student that's in college, whether you're a mother or you're not, all of these different categories that we live in, we have so many expectations to do so much. And as Meena mentioned, I am unable to do good at everything if I'm saying yes to all the things. And so to me, one of the strategies that I keep implementing and reminding myself of is I keep one sheet of paper for the week. And once that sheet of paper is full, I can't add anything else to it. And I've had some students talk about this concept of spoons. I haven't looked it up yet, but this concept that once your plate is full, once all of the things that you're doing, once you're at capacity, if you add anything else, all of the other things are going to lose quality or lose something that you can no longer contribute in a meaningful way. And so that whole concept of grind culture, to me, it usually pops up when I've said yes to too many things, or when I'm unable to do the things that either my body needs, like a walk or sleep or food, or just like quiet time. Right? Just no more meetings today. I need to just regroup my own thoughts and just breathe.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad that we're recording this 5 months later, because as of last week, I started 2 of my 9 a.m. morning classes with meditation. And I said to the students, if you don't want to participate, you don't have to. But I feel really overwhelmed this morning, and it's only Tuesday or Wednesday. And I just want to start the day with some calm music and some guided meditation. And everybody stayed. We all laid on the floor and we just like calmly started. And then we came back and we had a very productive class. And so even things like that, where at first I was like, maybe I shouldn't do this. And then I was like, no, they all need, I'm showing them how, even when I feel at burnout, how do I, instead of canceling class, I'm still coming, but we need to take a quick time out and let's do it together.
Yeah, we're definitely modeling some of that behavior. And Meena, with those email, those boundaries in terms of response times, I think that's healthy to teach them that, so that when they go into the professional field, they don't feel obligated to be on email all the time. And so just helping them build those habits. And that reminds me, one other thing that I'm trying is in a typography 1 course, in between projects, it can feel so hectic leading up to that final deadline. And then, so sort of as Ryan was mentioning, like pausing, we share our final project, and then I've been trying just like little maker like workshops. It's not a final product, but let's try experimenting with making something out of old magazines, or making something with a grid, like just filling in areas of a grid, or modular type forms. And sometimes the themes relate to a project we're about to launch. Like, okay, that's a little bit of a taste of type design or whatever, but sometimes they're not. And I think that's been really helpful for students to remember why they got into this, that they like making things. It's not about trying to get the professor's approval or trying to impress other classmates, but like enjoying making and creating for just another minute to recenter themselves why they're here.
Sort of a follow-up to that question. How have you noticed that expectations to hustle or grind have changed when you become a caretaker, or when your students become caretakers? And what support do you see being provided to caretakers?
I can answer that super fast by saying there's not support for caretakers. And there are many things at not only the institution I'm currently at, but at others, that as a young faculty member, as a pre-tenure or adjunct or fixed term, I wanted to do all the things and I never could because I had children. And so, at least in my experience, there's been many things that I would love to participate in, but meetings are scheduled after school pickup, which means I would have to hire someone to take care of my children outside of that time, And so this whole concept of, oh, we have this lunch and learn that's during your class, but then we also have this thing on Friday at 3 p.m. with wine. And I'm like, that sounds great, but that's school pickup. And so I know, in my situation, it has been a real challenge to participate in some of those things, which makes me feel like, how can I create something that everyone could participate in that still has that same meaning or scope, but is at a time or a place where we could all engage and be there. So
I have support now at my university, and I'm very proud of that. When we went back to face-to-face, my dean called my phone and just to say, hey, it's going to be okay. I'm in your position too. I have a young child. We're going to figure this out. I mean, what dean does that? That is really, that's a feather in the cap of the institution I'm at right now. But my last institution I left because there was not support. Mm-hmm. The conversation went from, hey, I need more support, to let's talk about what these 3 job offers would look like if you lived in these 3 different cities, Meena. So, you're I mean, that's a really tough conversation to have with a dean. So I traded up, and I'm really glad for that. But I know what it's like not to have that, and I know that a lot of us are not in a position where we have that kind of support. Again, as I said before, I completely pivoted my life to support the life that I want to have now, and that was a very difficult thing to do. And So now my partner is also a university professor. They understand the work that I put in, and I understand the work that he puts in, and the university understands that we cannot be at the same thing at the same time. So they immediately, the moment that we started, they scheduled him on Tuesday, Thursday, me on Monday, Wednesday. They didn't even ask. They were like, you have a kid, you need to be on different schedules. And anytime there's ever something where we are both at the event, I feel like we need t-shirts that says, if you see us both here, we're paying somebody for it. Like that's how it is. And it's kind of funny, but it also is like absolutely the real deal. My colleagues that I work with directly in the design team, we have 6 of us. They understand completely. They are like 100% there for families, for our family. We are there for their family. We are a great team. We've gelled really well. People outside of my direct team, they don't, if they don't have children, they try to maybe plan something for 3 o'clock on a Friday. And, I appreciate the effort, but I won't be there because I have to go pick my kid up. And I love, again, like Ryan, I love that idea, but support for me, I've found a good network of it, and it's been very helpful. But it took 3 universities to get there.
Yeah. I will say, I also occasionally really want to participate in something, and I will go get my kids and I take them with me.
Oh, yes. You've reminded me. 5 months ago, I said this about my colleague at my last institution who would bring her child with her everywhere she went. And I remember I at that time was not married, and I said, you're bringing Esme. This is great. And she goes, I don't want anybody here thinking I do this without this kid. Yeah. I'm running laps and I've got both hands tied behind my back, and I want them to know that. And I thought that was a really strong statement, and I have never forgotten it.
Okay, so we've talked about how we set healthy obligations for ourselves and try to model that in the classroom. How would y'all talk to someone making a counter argument that sacrifice is required in order to prepare students for the workplace? So these are valuable tools. The idea that you need to like grind yourself down because the real world is harsh. How would you reply to that?
I think that sounds like gatekeeping. And if you grind yourself down, how sharp are you? What are the metrics here? I mean, is it the butts in seats, or is it that we're engaged? Because those are not the same thing.
Yeah, it comes down to this idea of rigor. I think a lot of institutions push. I've even had at some institutions things like, you need to grade harder. Too many of your students are doing well. And so I think what is the metric is a really good question, but also I think it is hard in our industry. A lot of times deadlines are really hard, or projects aren't managed well, and there's overlap. But in the real world, there are vacation days you can take. There are sick days you can take. You can hire a freelancer to help you with a project. You can turn down a project. The students don't have that luxury. And so I think that it's an unfair parallel to always say that we should design our classroom like a studio. Ryan, of course, you teach a class that's geared toward client work, so it's different. But it's a false parallel. They're not the same thing. There's a lot of different ways we're trying to get them to learn, not to just produce. So the methodologies, I think, have to be different. And then the other thing too is I've heard that a lot of, well, you're too soft. We could be too soft. They're not going to get that grit. And my response to that is just, well, have you tried? Like, I think there's just an unwillingness to try and to try different methods, because it's always been done that way. So how will we know if different methods work until we implement them?
And Brian, I know you've got 2 cents you're going to put in on this, and I just want to say to Erica, and to pose this to Ryan as well, before you answer. Our students have a portfolio application, right? So they have to show a portfolio to get in to the design program, and then have a portfolio exhibition to get out, essentially. So when they say, when we hear you're grading too easy, or you're not grading hard enough, my counter question to that group of people is, if they're in this class, if they made it in here, they shouldn't be getting below a B. They should not be getting below a B. So I'm curious, Erica and Ryan, do you have that experience where your students have to apply to get into the design program?
Yeah, we have 2 applications to get into our program.
So we are a BA. We're not a BFA. And as I mentioned, the program that I run here, the Integrated Media Arts program, works here. But when I taught at Penn State, or when I was a student at Purdue, or when I was a student at SCAD, I don't believe that what I do here would have worked in any of those environments. And so, yeah, the original question of just this concept of the counter arguments, you need to push them and make sure you're doing all this. My foundation argument to that is, look at the work that they're making, and look at the feedback in the course evaluations, and look at their portfolios, and drive downtown and look at the new branding that we just created for this local nonprofit that is now thriving because we've supported them through this course, or through these multiple practicum courses over 1 semester or 3 semesters, or however long. I don't get this argument very much, but when I do, I always go back to the discussion of overworking and pushing yourself to the point of failure, and how creativity thrives in stillness, and that you have to pause in order to actually process what you're trying to make. And so this whole concept of like allowing yourself to wonder and allowing yourself to play. And as Erica mentioned, if you just push through and bulldoze through that typography project, and you don't pause and take a moment that you can, let's play today, let's get out random stuff and make something. Those days are super important, because it just switches the brain into this other way of thinking that many times allows us to counter this grind, right?
Yeah, and I think it breaks up that bit of competition that happens, especially with the portfolio reviews. Some of our students can feel like they're in competition with each other. And so the grind culture, like in a program, I think one of the strongest counters to that is community. So how can we help these students feel like they have a community base, that they are a network, and that they're no longer, or that they're not in competition? I mean, they sort of, they feel that again in senior year, that they're competing for the same jobs and things like that. But how can we help them to see the resources that are there rather than see the negative of it?
And one last thing I forgot to mention. So we do not have a portfolio review to get into the program, and we don't do one at sophomore year where people are cut, similar to what I experienced as an undergrad and a graduate student. But I think the positive side of what comes out at the end of graduation, whatever that may, whenever we complete the degree, whether it's a secondary or an actual degree within the program, is every student has their own individualized path. And so, Meena, if you're into illustration, that's your path. And Erica, if you're into typography, that's your path. And if I'm into web design, that's my path. And so each of us have these portfolios of robust work that has grown out of either the client-based projects or those traditional, 100, 200, 300 level courses where we all work on similar projects, but content of our choosing. And so I do miss the rigor of having those portfolio reviews, but I also now appreciate the concept of everyone coming out with their own unique goals and their own passion, which is very different than what I experienced when it's kind of everyone's doing the same.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it reminds me, one of the things I love my colleague does in he teaches a senior portfolio. It's just sort of a job preparedness, course. He asks them, what do you want after graduation? And they start to answer the jobs and where the studios they want to work at. He's like, but do you want to live somewhere that's bikeable? Do you want to live somewhere with lots of live music? Like, we should prioritize other things besides our career. And so that's another way, I think that's a good way to individualize their and break up that competition. Like, I am going to go to a city that, I can walk and work, or I want to stay close to my family. Like, there's validity in all of those goals. And I think there is a lot of pressure to try to get to the best firm, to work at a really big studio, award-winning, to do freelance work that's published and all this stuff. But if that isn't your goal, that's okay too. And embracing that success might look different for everybody.
All right, we're getting near the end, so this will be our last question. Ryan, you mentioned that it's important to have stillness when you're designing, to have room for that like creative design thinking. Either in your personal lives or in the classroom, how do y'all make space for that stillness to let your mind wander?
I've kept a daily drawing practice for the last 6 years. That is one way that I start out, like basically, before I start another project, it's just an exercise that I do to warm me up. I also work out. I am a CrossFitter and I run. And that is extremely helpful for me to find quietness in my mind, and it allows me to think, especially if I'm running. Gives me a lot of time to just sort of think about new ideas or reimagined ways of coming at a conversation that I know that I'm going to have, or something like that. But I also, I always have students reflect on their work. That is sort of the missing piece of the design process. I think in a lot of studios or classrooms, we have to reflect on our work, the impact of it, what the outcomes were, success, how that was measured, and then being able to remark on that, things that we could do differently, things that were really good, ways that it was supportive to the client or the user. So reflection, like meditation on the work, is one way that we do that in the classroom. But for me personally, those other two methods are the way that I do. And, often I'll turn off my phone and I'll forget my phone. Like, I just won't have my phone on me. And that is another helpful thing, because I think looking at my phone is a huge compulsion, not so much a need at all. So that's another way for me personally.
I just have a quick answer. I'm working on building more moments of protected time, but walking is really helpful for me. Just not worrying about having a podcast or anything, but just being present and looking at and listening to the things all around me, and getting away from a screen and moving my body a little bit.
Yeah. So I have a whole lot of answers for this one, because I remember this being a very reflective question during our discussion in Seattle. And also in the last couple of months, I think there's been so much stuff in my own life that has come up that has also caused me to like purposefully take a minute and pause. And so I remember us talking about this concept of kind of mindfulness and how do we approach mindfulness and stillness in our lives. And just like Meena, I remember talking about, I ride a bike, or I lift at the gym, or I have friends that I go and hike with, and keeping those friendships intact and making sure that I reach out to that friend that pushes me to do my best, not on the computer and not at work. But having people in your life that are outside of your work environment, which I have told Meena recently, if I lived closer, we would CrossFit together and we would design and teach and do all the things, and we would love it. But the reality is I'm in a really small rural community. I actually grew up in the town that I'm in, and that's one of the reasons I started the nonprofit that I run. But there's also this challenge that I go to the grocery store and I'm working, And I go to the library with my kids and I'm working because I'm constantly seeing people. And so one of the challenges that I have faced is, yes, turn off the phone, go do something where no one can find you for a period of time. Like I just hiked the 1,000 steps that are here locally. Go and lift and go and do things where you don't have to be, as Erica was mentioning, you don't have to listen to the podcast or listen to the student presentation that you need to evaluate. It's, you have to take a moment to yourself. And if that's lifting or riding a bike or, you know, all these things, whatever it is that brings joy to you, then that's what you have to do. I recently, in the last 2 weeks, had a concussion. And if you can imagine having 7 days of no screen time, no cell phones, no computers, it was very hard, but it also forced me to accept the fact that my entire being has been on a screen in some capacity. And so I started letterpress printing again. I started sketching. I started doing all of these things that have always brought me joy, but I just forgot about because I'm so busy on the screen. And I think for many of us, not saying that I recommend a 0 out of 10, do not get a concussion, but I highly recommend, right, having these somewhat planned breaks that we can reconnect with the things that are meaningful to us, that bring out the creative part of us that, right, thrives and keeps us going. I think that's really important.
Yeah, I think that's a great summary. That if we don't give our students a space in the classroom to like reflect and stop for a moment, if they're constantly having to produce and make, and there's an expectation of always being on, there's no room for not just their health, but a place for their creativity and their work to thrive. Yeah. Okay. I think we're at the end of our time. I want to thank you guys so much for being here, for reuniting and doing this again. It's been lovely hearing all of your answers. I've been writing a bunch of notes that I'm going to apply in my own classroom. This has been wonderful.
Yes, it's so good to see you all.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kaylee. Good to see you, Erica and Ryan.
Thanks, y'all.
All right. Well, I hope y'all have a wonderful day, and I'll see y'all around. I'll stop the recording.